State Controller, Ms. Paquin. For the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mr. Yamanaka. Ms. Yamamoto. State Treasurer Ma.
Here.
Chairperson Higa, you have a quorum present.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see, our first agenda item is to approve the committee agenda. Could I get a motion for that? So I have a motion from Lynn, a second? Second from Keith, thank you. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you. I see the next agenda item is approval of our committee minutes. A second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed or abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay, so Karen, okay, Karen's abstaining. Okay. But before we have a guest speaker with us this morning, but before we turn it over to him, I think I just want to recognize that we have several new members of the Audit and Risk Management Committee, including, hi Gail, nice to meet you, including a new representative, joining our board from the Department of Finance. So, really welcome all the new members to the committee, as well as one of our new board representatives. And I think that, Mr. Jensen, I'm sorry, I think I'm skipping over an agenda item related to an information item. Sorry about that. Well, when we get to the guest speaker, I think it's a great opportunity for some of our new committee members to kind of get grounded in our responsibilities and what the role is like for the board. Looking at some of our risk and compliance functions. So before I jumped ahead a little bit, so we're on agenda item number 3, which is a consent agenda information item.
Yes, this is a progress report for the committee to review with regards to the progress that's being made on the independent financial statement auditor's management letter that was provided to us as part of the audit last year. And when an auditor is conducting an audit, sometimes they'll notice deficiencies and they rate those as kind of like material or significant or just a deficiency noted like an observation. In this management letter, these are not considered significant or material findings, and sometimes management letters are not presented to boards. However, for being transparent as an organization, we choose to do that, and it allows the board to monitor management's progress on correcting these deficiencies that were noted during the course of the audit, and so that if there's any issues that come up, because what happens is Crow will validate the next year whether these findings or deficiencies are corrected. And so this allows the board to monitor and ensure that management has made those corrective actions. And as I have reviewed through there, I don't see that there's any, they seem to be making good progress on the observations that are noted. And there's some that are kind of continuing issues, if you will, such as controls around member data and our emphasis on making sure with regards to the completeness and accuracy of member data. So it's an ongoing type of an issue. It's been in the report for the last couple of years, will probably be in there. It's something that we always want to keep our eye on the ball there, if you will. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and also management is able to respond to any questions the committee might have.
Okay, I don't think we have any questions from the committee, but I'm going to do one other pause before we start with Mr. Funston. I don't know if it's just because my seat moved from one end of the dais to the other, and if it's thrown me off, but we do have kind of a process change regarding how the board and the committees receive public comment. And so because it's a change in structure, I wanted to go through some instructions for the members in the audience. So the board will have a 10-minute public comment period at the end of each agenda item going forward during our committee meeting. Public comment after each item will be limited to that particular agenda item, and then there will be an additional opportunity for statements from the public for items that are not pertaining to specific agenda items at the end of the open session meeting. Individuals who wish to speak at a board meeting should complete and submit a speaker request form to the CEO or any CalSTRS staff. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes for his or her presentation, and if there's not enough time for speakers to have 3 minutes, then the timing will be at the chair's discretion. The Teachers Retirement Board meetings are live, web streamed, and video archived, which are available to the public on calstrs.com. So to protect the privacy of minors who wish to address the board, public commenters under the age of 18 may address the board, but CalSTRS will not live, web stream, or video archive these comments. And public commenters over the age of 18 may be recorded and included in the web stream of the meeting. So members of the public may speak to the board during their allotted time, but audio or visual recordings from a third party are not allowed due to copyright issues. So we just we felt it was important to share that information because it is a modification to how we conduct our meetings. So we have had, gone through a couple of agenda items. I just want to make sure that there are no requests to speak on any of those items. Okay, great. Then I think we're back on track. Mr. Jensen, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our speaker.
Happy to do that. One of the reasons that we thought that this would be an important education item is that we're required to follow the Institute of Internal Auditor professional standards for the practice of internal auditing. And recently, a standard was revised, number 2050, with regards to communication. And sharing information is not really new for audits, but this revised standard requires that we're able to demonstrate and really thoughtfully share and coordinate our information and what we'll call assurance providing across the organization. And so we do have some time carved out in our annual plan for 2019 and that the committee approved with regards to assurance mapping, and we've dedicated some resources to this activity. So we thought it'd be a great idea to provide this education opportunity at this time with regards to what we're doing with regards to making sure that the board and the committee has adequate assurances with regards to the management of risk within the organization and making sure that our risk and controls are working appropriately. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Rick Funston. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Funston Advisory Services, and he's performed numerous reviews of public pension systems with regards to governance and risk and strategy operations as well. He also provides consulting services to board and executive education. He's worked with many public pension systems across the U.S., including the New York City Bureau of Asset Management, South Carolina Public Employees Pension System, the South Carolina Investment Commission, as well as the School Employees Retirement System. And when he's done here, he'll be heading up to the Washington State Investment Board to address them as well. And so he also authored a couple of books that are listed in here on creating a risk intelligence enterprise, and more recently one called One of a Kind, which is a guide for 21st century public pension trustees. And he offers today a unique perspective to the board regarding its fiduciary responsibilities for oversight of risk management and the assurances with regards to the management of risk. And many of the articles that he's published is also available on the NASRA website that with regards to governance and risk management. And so with that, I'll turn the time now over to Mr. Rick Funston.
Thank you, Larry, and good morning. Thank you very much for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you. I have, I think as I mentioned to a couple of you before we got started, I probably tried to put 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound sack. And so I may compensate for that by speaking in gusts of up to 1,500 words per minute. So I'll try to control that. And I want to give you an overview, first of all, of what we're seeing across the country. In terms of the kinds of challenges that boards are facing and the questions that audit committees are asking, and to give you, in some cases, a different, perhaps a different way of thinking about it and talking about it. I'll probably use some terms that you may not be familiar with or may not be familiar in their context, but I'll try and explain what I'm talking about. And please, it will make it much more interesting, I think, for everyone, for you to just ask questions as we go through at any point in time. So with that in mind, What I'd like to talk about, first of all, is what do we see as the difference between best practice and leading practice? We get asked that question all the time. What do you think is best? I'll come to that in just a moment. I'd also like to talk about what we refer to as the powers that are reserved exclusively for the board and its committees, because I think when you talk about oversight, you need to put that in a context, and I'll give you a framework that we use for doing just that. We'd also I want to talk about prudence, decision intelligence, and fiduciary duty. How do they tie together? How much information or what kind of information should the board and its committees be asking for? And how do you gauge whether or not you are actually fulfilling your fiduciary duty? And then here's where I start to get a little different, and I'll talk about this more. I believe that it is the executive's responsibility to provide you with reasonable assurance that the organization is being managed as you would expect. I believe then it is the responsibility of other third parties who are not part of executive management to provide you with independent reassurance that what they're telling you can be relied upon. So it's trust, and then trust but verify. And I'll be coming back to that message throughout. I was also asked to talk about 3 lines of defense, and I'll explain more about what that means. And again, as I've already touched on, what is the role of assurance and reassurance? And I know you use the term assurance to refer to things like internal audit and external audit and so on. I'll begin the confusion now by saying I really think that that's management's responsibility to provide you with reasonable, not absolute, but reasonable assurances that things are being run the way that you would expect them to be. And then it's up to others to give you reassurance that that is reliable. So then the question is, how do you kind of put all of that together and coordinate the defense? So as you may have gathered from the title of the book that we published a short time ago, called One of a Kind, we believe one size fits one. While public pension systems have many common challenges, they are all unique. They have different circumstances, different levels of capability, maturity, and so we believe that it's up to each retirement system to determine what's best for its particular situation and circumstances. So what I'll be describing to you is what we consider leading, which of course is a matter of our opinion based on our experience with a wide range of systems, but ultimately, obviously, it's up to you to determine what you think will be best for CalSTRS. Obviously, the 21st century public pension environment is rapidly changing. And it presents many challenges. It has gone from being what one would kind of romantically think as being very stable back in 1999, 2000, to today, where one of the chapters in the book is entitled Shift Happens. And it is happening all the time, and it's happening with high velocity. So the question is, and I'm going to relabel this particular slide to call it adaptive governance. Because how does the organization adapt the way that it understands and manages itself in relation to the challenges presented by a very rapidly changing environment? So in that context, I want to talk about the powers that are reserved exclusively for the board and its committees. Talk about, actually, I'm not going to talk about structure, culture, and dynamics, but obviously it's a factor in terms of how the board gets on with itself and with its executives and with its stakeholders. But time doesn't permit me getting into that today, but I wanted to obviously recognize that important factor. Prudent processes, again, how do you understand the issues, the background, the options that are available to you. And again, I will not be discussing that, but obviously prudence is extremely important. It's essential in terms of you being able to fulfill your fiduciary duties is to have a prudent process so that you understand as best as you can the consequences of the decisions that you make. Decision intelligence, I will talk about that briefly, but one of the things that we see in a lot of organizations is that there's a lot of data and there's a lot of information. The question is what kind of intelligence does the board receive and what kind of insights does the board receive in order to allow it to make a prudent decision and fulfill its fiduciary duty, which again, I will touch on. And the last area which we'll spend more time on is how do you get independent advice and reassurance that the information that's being presented to you is reliable, that there may be contrary opinions, what are the dissenting opinions, what's the full range of options. Some boards refer to being presented by management, being presented with a baked cake, and that this is the only option that's available to you, and kind of march down that path. And I'm not implying in any way that that's the case here, but the concern is how do you realistically understand what's the range of options that are available to you, and how do you get independent advice and reassurance that you're understanding the situation. So in terms of powers reserved then, this really relates to what are the key decisions and who gets to make them, right? So from the board's perspective, the board gets to set the strategic direction and the policy framework, right? And that would include all of the examples that are shown there. Another power reserved for the board, which would typically be reflected in your charters, would be to approve certain things like and it may not be you. It may not be the board that actually gets to determine its own composition. It may be obviously embedded in the legislation. But what are the policies, the plans and budgets, the investment decisions and so on? Some of these are, again, reserved for the board. Others are reserved for the legislature, the governor. Others are reserved for the executive. How are those questions addressed? The next area is conduct, and typically the board will conduct its meetings. It will conduct a board self-assessment. It will select its independent auditors. It will select and evaluate the executive director or the CEO, and it will adjudicate appeals depending on its, again, on its mandate. The last area, which is the one that I'm going to be spending more time on, is talking about the oversight of delegated authority, and how do you know that the policy and the direction that you've established at the board is actually being carried out within that policy framework. I'll also talk a little bit about performance and risk management, and I'll say right now that I think the biggest problem about performance and risk management is that risk is seen as something separate and apart from performance. So I'm reminded of the Larson cartoon where they had the two deer standing in the woods, and one of them had a big bullseye on its chest, and the other one turns to it and says, "Bummer of a birthmark, Hal." And I think the problem is that ERM programs in general, by setting themselves apart from the way the organization is run, by having a different taxonomy and so on, tends to undermine its own relevance. And I'll talk about that. And again, I know next to nothing about the program here. I'm speaking in general terms. And then the question is, how do you get information? How does it flow to you? Again, how do you get independent reassurance? And how do you communicate with your stakeholders? Those are all things that you would oversee. Does that make sense in terms of a framework of set, approve, conduct, and oversee? And I know you probably have charters that go on for a number of pages essentially describing these things, of which things belong to you and which belongs to the legislature and so on. But I always find it's useful to kind of frame it in this way. So, who gets to make the decision? Is it the legislator, the governor, the electorate, the board, or management? And that's all part of determining what powers are reserved specifically for the board. It's an organizing framework of setting strategic direction and policy, approving key decisions and plans, conducting selected activities, and overseeing delegated authority. And if you think about it, those typically sum up what the authorities are of a typical board. So the whole hope is that this will contribute to intelligent decision-making because it's simple, and simple is the hardest thing to do. Right? If you're smart, you keep it simple. It's easy to make things complicated. And I hope I'm not going to argue against myself here in the subsequent presentation. It should be easy to understand. It should be easily aligned with existing charters, and it should clarify who's supposed to do what. So here's an example where I just simply did this analysis of an existing charter. This was probably of a governance policy, which was probably some 15, 20 pages long, but essentially this is what came out where the powers are reserved on one page. Here's the things that they set, here's the things that they approve, here's the things they conduct, and here's the things they oversee. Again, just to clarify who's supposed to do what. As I said, I'm going to skip structure, culture, and dynamics and prudent process. I am going to talk about decision intelligence, fiduciary duty, and independent advice and reassurance. So decision intelligence, again, it typically, you proceed from data to information to intelligence to insights. That's if you're fortunate to get that information. The biggest challenge is to take a large body of data and boil it down into something that's meaningful. What are the patterns, right? And when you talk about intelligence, signal detection and pattern recognition is one of the key distinguishing characteristics of intelligence. So how can the organization then understand and gain intelligence and insights into its vital functions? So I'll give you an example here. Obviously, a vital function is something that's essential to the organization's success, whether it's investment or benefits operations and so on. So you should understand what those vital functions are, but likewise, you should also understand what are the vital signs that tell you how well that function is performing. And again, it should be simple. And again, in terms of a dashboard, again, about the performance. When these performance indicators start to go out of what you would consider to be an acceptable range, that's when you become increasingly at risk. And that way, risk is directly related to the performance of the organization. So this is what I'd mentioned earlier, that performance and risk, I would offer a different definition to you than what you might normally hear. Because typical definitions of risk include, the probability of an adverse event negatively affecting the achievement of your objectives. There are elements to that which are obviously worthwhile, but I would say that it's much easier for people to understand what is the performance that we expect as an organization, whether it's strategic, financial, legal, operational, reputational, or other. What's the expected performance, and how did we actually do? And then the question becomes is the difference between actual and expected acceptable? And if not, when should we know? Does that make sense? I'm just, again, to try and keep it simple, expected performance minus actual performance equals risk, to the extent that becomes an unacceptable difference. So the tolerance then is if you're on target, right? In other words, the difference is acceptable, right? Because it's never going to be exactly what you thought it was, but is there a range of acceptability? Then it becomes at risk or it becomes off target as one kind of characterization. So that way you can look at what kind of, and I'm using a taxonomy here, by the way, that's obviously kind of the typical stoplight fashion of red, yellow, green. I understand you use blue. So when I say green, you think blue. Okay, all right. And that's the only customization that you'll see in terms of your current program. So success then would be an acceptable difference between actual and expected performance. And of course, trust then is based on an assumption that the board is reasonably assured by the executives that actual performance is green unless otherwise notified. In other words, you're managing based on exception. You're getting reports based on exception. Otherwise, assume that it's green. Does that make sense? Right, because it has kind of rather profound implications as you go forward. And again, not knowing what your current system is, you're trusting the executive to give you reliable information that the organization is behaving as expected unless they tell you otherwise. And then the question then becomes is how do you verify that that's reliable? Does that seem like a reasonable kind of description for what oversight's about? Okay. All right. So the problem becomes then green or blue in your case becomes one of the biggest sources of risk because you're counting on controls to protect you. If it's red or yellow, then you know it's a problem and presumably the executive are dealing with it and that's been brought to the board's attention. And so if it's red or yellow, there's an action plan in place to deal with it. If it's green, however, or blue, right, then you're counting on those controls to protect you. And if it turns out that it's not really green and you get a because that's where the unpleasant surprises come from, is when you thought it was green and it turns out not to be green, right? So the question then is, it leads to a tremendous loss of credibility, right, when you think it's green, but it's not. And I had written previously about, I think a while back it was very popular to talk about black swans. black swan events, this, this highly improbable, extraordinarily significant event, which seems to happen quite often. But nonetheless, that was the black swan. My argument at that time was that actually it's the white swan you need to be more concerned about, because that's the one that's probably going to bite you because you think it's friendly. And so that's the problem, and that's really what we're trying what I'm trying to get at here. And of course, one of my favorite sayings is that reputation is gained in inches per year and lost in feet per second when you think something is green and it turns out that it's not. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes. Yes, yeah, although in a medical test, you would think a false positive could be a bad thing, but
Right.
yes, you're counting on something that you think is
Right.
true,
Right.
that you're safe, but you're not.
Right, okay.
And that's the worst situation to be in, right? Because if you know you've got a problem, then you're dealing with it, or you're aware of it, or
Right.
we have to compensate for that. But if you think it's good and it's not, that's when you really get blindsided. And that's why, again, I mean, management will be telling you, this is our reasonable assurance, because there's no absolute assurances, that it's green or blue, right? But that's why you need then independent reassurance to go kick the tires, to make sure that what you understand is green is actually green because somebody else has looked at it and checked it. Because that's where you need to keep looking. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So I talked earlier about decision intelligence and the amount of data and information that can overwhelm anyone. And if you're a new board member, and I understand there may be new members to the board, you'll be drinking from at least one fire hose, possibly two. The average kind of learning curve for a new trustee is about 2 years. And so the question is how do you get up to speed? Who do you trust? What are the options that are available to you? Do you really understand what the consequences are? And I think one of the things that is typically underutilized is the board portal. It's typically used for, secure meetings, agendas and minutes. And is my time up? No, I'm just kidding. Did I time out? Okay, so I've got to make it up from here now. But the question with the board portal is it's usually used for meeting communications and so on, but it's not really used for its potential, which could be used to house all kinds of information that would be available to you around definitions, other examples, educational materials, and so on. And again, I haven't looked at your board portal. I don't know how you're using it. I'm just seeing this as generally the case. And it could also be used as a kind of a self-paced onboarding and continuous learning process where materials could be put out there that you could then self-select and use. So it also then would help you to have information that would be available to you that would tell you, given an issue, and there are many issues that are of strategic significance. What's the background on that issue? What are the options that are available to you as an organization? What's the least you could do to what's the most you could do? What are the related pros and cons, so you have time to consider that intelligence as part of your decision-making process. And one of the things I think in coming to fiduciary duty is to ask yourselves at the end of each process, as you come to consider which option to choose, is to ask yourselves whether or not your fiduciary duty has been fulfilled in relation to that specific decision. Although the graphic here shows a young woman crossing the finish line. As you know, as trustees, you never really cross the finish line, because as soon as you cross one, another one appears, and another one, and another one, and another one. So it's more of a continuing marathon, right? But it's marked by individual decisions taken along the way. So how do you share with your fellow trustees, new and existing, what's the background on that particular issue? How did you get to arrive at this particular set of options and decisions? And why did you feel at that point in time that it best fulfilled your fiduciary duty? So again, back to the slide I'm going to rename Adaptive Governance, covering the various areas again. Now let's talk about independent advice and reassurance. And one of the elements, obviously, of oversight is to prudently delegate authority. And as I mentioned before, I use the term again, reasonable assurances are provided by executives that performance is within the policy parameters as expected, that the variability is acceptable unless otherwise noted, because then you'll get an exception report, and that management is accountable for analysis and correction of unacceptable variation. And it may raise policy questions, and which appropriate, they should then come to the board for a consideration about what the policy direction should be. All of this, again, assumes management can be trusted and that management's reports are reliable. So how then do you address that issue? So there are three lines of defense. Operating management is really, it performs the vital functions of investments and benefits and services and administration and public affairs and technology. Then you have a second line of defense, and they have the, I should say, they have the primary responsibility for performance, and therefore, in the way that I use the term, for risk management as well. It's built in, it's inseparable. Then you have risk functions that operate or that exist within operating management. So you have a chief operating investment officer, you have general counsel, you have HR, you have the information security office. Who backs up operating management. And then you have a third line of defense, which is independent advice and reassurance from internal audit, compliance, enterprise risk management. You have an independent consultant to the Risk and Audit Committee. You have third parties, internal audit, investment consultants, actuarial consultants, governance consultants, and so on, whose job it is to provide you with independent advice and reassurance that you're being, basically the information you're receiving makes sense and is reliable. Does that make sense? Okay. If I'm slipping into 1,500 words per minute, then I'll, yes.
Oh, that's okay. I'm going to. Hi, committee and new committee members. My name is Bob Yep, and I'm a professor at UC Davis, and I'm your consultant for this particular board. Those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet, I'll catch up with you. All right, so Rick, so three lines of defense. I like this stuff. So do you mind if I ask a few questions?
No, by all means.
So let's talk about that first line, the operating management. Who within, let's say, an organization like CalSTRS would be part of that first line of defense? Is it just certain people, or would it be everyone? Does everyone own a piece of that control management function, or is it just certain siloed people?
No, I think collectively, anyone who would consider themselves to be part of operating management, in other words, anyone who's not in column 3, right? Anyone and everyone. Risk management is everyone's responsibility. It's not, I've been referring to the executive because those are the ones who report to you and provide you with reasonable assurances, but it's everyone in investment, benefits and services, administrative services, public affairs and technology who has a responsibility to understand and manage the performance that they're responsible for and the related risks to make sure that it stays within acceptable ranges.
So it's fair to say that every employee of an organization really plays some role in the risk management process.
Yes, if you consider that performance and risk are inseparable.
And I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the second line. Let's look at that. So the second line appears to be wholly within the organization, and so it's not the let's say lower level operating management sort of day-to-day operations, right? And it is also not the independent reassurance. I like your word. Could you maybe give some specific examples of what we might see in a pension, who would be in that second line of defense, and what specific things they might do? Just maybe one or two simple examples.
Well, I've listed 4 functions here that are typically part of the chief operating investment officer is part of investment. But then that person then would be responsible for making sure that the operations within investment are consistent with policy and in compliance. And you'd have, basically 3 types of compliance: legal compliance, contractual compliance, and policy compliance.
Nice.
So that's what their responsibility would be.
Perfect. And then this third line of defense seems to be more independent, but yet the reassurances you referred to, but yet, and you have sort of a gray line drawn there. It seems like some of that is internal to the organization. Like
Yes,
the guy
it is.
like the guy you're sitting next to.
Yes, but
And
that's the internal element of it, and then you have an external element as well, which is the third parties. So you have an internal element of internal audit, compliance, and ERM that should be providing independent advice and reassurance that the reports that are being received are reliable. And then you also then can go out and talk to specialists, all right, who would then give you a different, their particular view as an independent. Now, sometimes there are questions raised about how independent are they really, given the long-term kind of relationship that they sometimes have, but it's the same thing then as an internal organization.
Right.
But again, there's no absolutes.
Of course. And then for the purposes of a new board, so let's say take the internal audit function for an organization like CalSTRS, headed up by Larry here. So Larry's job is to sort of, as you said, be an independent advisor for reassurance for the risk management system in place at the organization. Who sort of is looking over Larry's shoulder? Is there anyone sort of looking over Larry's shoulder?
Well, there's an internal line of reporting and accountability, but you would look at, and again, they're looking at different elements of it. But you could, for example, you could have specialists come in, for example, on a technology audit where you'd have a information technology firm that would come in and do a specialized, right? So I believe also, for example, you have a transformation project, an IT transformation project going on right now, where you have another consultant whose sole job it is to advise on progress. And obstacles, presumably. Again, I'm not familiar with the mandate, but that's the idea where if you need specialized independent reassurance, you go contract for it.
If I might add just one thing to that too, is our standards require that we have a quality assurance review at least every 5 years. And so recently KPMG came in and actually evaluated our performance of our internal audit function and provided an opinion to the board with regards to the type of work that we're doing. We did receive a good opinion from them, but that's part of our quality improvement program, and we have so at least every 5 years we have somebody come in. We also communicate regularly with the Department of Finance, who has oversight of internal audit units with regards to state agencies and all state agencies, and we communicate with them regularly as well.
Great.
Department of Finance's independent audit arm to review any functions of the board? So Department of Finance has an Office of State Audits, and they're completely independent from the government, or from the governor's office, I should say. But they go through and actually themselves, not unlike KPMG, worked. Have you ever done that, just given the fiduciary obligation not only we have as a board member, but also that the state has to fully fund the plan? Has there ever been any consideration of an audit of that kind?
So make sure I understand your question. The Department of Finance offers the quality assurance reviews for internal audits?
Finance offers a function within the Department of Finance,
Yeah,
and it's an independent audit of any function. So for example, in this case, they would come in, they bring, not unlike the controller's office does in local governments, or the state auditor does. So they would come in and offer a similar review to the one you just described KPMG did.
Yes.
But it would be from a slightly different perspective, right? They have the general fund as a backdrop, not only board governance. So has there ever been any consideration of, is that something you could maybe look into and we could get you more information about?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And I have actually in my past experience worked with the Department of Finance conducting such an audit, right? And they did a good job. We look at different possibilities. Department of Finance is one option. An external firm is another option, and then also we peer reviews even among different pension systems where auditors get together and things like that. So we've looked at different types of options on how to approach it. We can certainly give that additional consideration in our next cycle for peer review and more information. Unfortunately, last time I think when we were considering it, the schedule was several years out before they could assist us. And so we had to look at a different option. But I do support that option and working with the Department of Finance on it. They do have oversight of all internal audit agencies, and so,
Right.
you know, all state agencies with regards to internal audits. So,
Right.
so I think it's a good way for us to do, and we will consider that,
I
yes.
appreciate that. Because I think you raise a good point, that another thing to consider is rather than conducting kind of the audit itself, is setting up, having them be a part of the peer review, even to have some checks and balances on the board like
Correct.
we've spoken about. So I think there's a lot of ways in which that independent arm of the Department of Finance could really help the
Yep.
board in ensuring that we're looking at it from lots of different perspectives, not solely kind of a governance outside
Yep, I agree.
private entity. Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
And so just one quick follow-up question. So Larry, what is our cycle for doing the peer review of our audit function? Did KPMG just do that about 2 years ago?
So that was performed in 2016. So we would be looking at arranging another one here within the next year or so. So may be a good time to start, you know,
Exploring.
we're looking at lining that up now.
Got it, okay. Thank you.
Great. So I think that asks, you know, or tries to address the question of who watches the watchers. And of course, again, there's no absolute assurance. You just simply have to do the best you can under the circumstances to reassure yourselves that the information that you're getting is reliable. So there's a number of different sources of this, as we've just talked about. I won't dwell on it, but you get independent advice, again, from your fiduciary and legal counsel, your investment consultant, and again, as we pointed out, from internal and external sources. The roles are, again, operating management is expected to achieve the expected performance with acceptable risk, in other words, within acceptable limits and within policy. Provide reasonable assurance that performance is achieved unless they tell you otherwise. The risk functions support the operating managers in achieving their expected performance within the policy parameters, and the independent advice, again, comes back to say that management's reports are reliable and that green is green, or in your case, blue is blue. So as I mentioned before, there is a hidden risk of green. But first of all, when something comes back to you as yellow or red, management's already aware of it. You know that there's a problem, and that presumably they have an action plan in place. The thing that you have to consider there is how fast can it happen? In my first book, I interviewed people like Mario Andretti and people who climb Mount Everest and combat pilots and so on. And I asked them the question, you know, how bad can it get and how fast can it get that bad? And of course, they looked at me and just laughed, because it can get very bad very, very quickly. So simply because you're aware of something being yellow and red, the question is, what's the potential velocity for it deteriorating? You need to understand, you know, again, how quickly can it get worse? Some things take a long time, others can happen very, very quickly. Green, again, you're counting on key controls to protect you. You're assuming everything is okay, everything is good. But if it's green, you think it's green and it's actually red, then that's the potential catastrophe, where it would seriously undercut management's credibility, and risk, again, can quickly cascade. And the problem, too, that I have with a lot of risk taxonomy is they treat risks as individual risks. But when things get bad, it's usually because a whole bunch of things went bad all at the same time. It's not just one thing, they cascade. And unfortunately, most risk assessment methodologies today don't look at how risks interact. They only look at them in isolation. So that's a problem, because that's really not how reality works. It's usually one little thing leads to another little thing, leads to another little thing, ends up with a big problem. There are many anecdotes to go along with that, but time doesn't permit. But Chernobyl, for example, was the result of a safety test gone wrong. Early warning, then you need independent reassurance that controls are actually working, and that's why I'm saying you should go out and make sure that the things that you are counting on to protect you are actually working the way that you expect, because that's where the surprises will come from. So again, no surprises. Executives give you reasonable assurances. You have vital signs for vital functions, and the executives are accountable for performance. And then the independent reassurance should match that. There should be a verification process, stress testing green controls what are the potential indicators of failure, and escalate emerging risks as needed and provide independent advice. When you're kind of putting it all together, if there's real alignment between these lines of defense, then you'd have a shared database, preferably an intelligence system. You'd have a common language. People talk about things the same way. You have integrated assessments, they're aligned, and you have good coverage, and you have integrated reporting to management and the board. And obviously, the benefits of that is you'd have more comprehensive coverage. You'd also reduce audit fatigue if one group is coming out to audit you after another group is just finished. Regardless of how helpful it may be, it takes its toll on operating management. You should also be able to improve your reliance on one another's work. So one audit done in one area or by another one function should be able to be supported or accepted by another. And then, again, improve reassurance that green is actually green. So again, that kind of gives you a framework that looks at the powers reserved. Again, I did not discuss structure, culture, and dynamics, but hopefully that gives you a context for understanding adaptive governance. And I'll stop there and just ask if you have any further questions.
Thank you very much. Rick, I think that there was I'm reassured that there was a lot that I heard in your presentation that I think are practices that we do have in our structure and process here at CalSTRS, whether it's looking at the, kind of data reporting to the board, the verification both internally and external validation. I think the piece about looking at the hidden risk of green is important, and I think it's one of the things that we've sometimes challenged our external consultants on, because we, as a board, we meet, maybe every other month, and sometimes things that they're looking at can go from, green to yellow, but by the time they get to us, they've gone back to green. And so I think we've also done some questioning and probing ourselves as a board to make sure that, we're not just hearing about everything being green, but if there are issues that our consultants or external third parties are working on, that we have some awareness of them to make sure that we're comfortable with our external validation as well. One of the last things you talked about was just the benefits of kind of coordinating and aligning, a lot of the risk management and defensives that we're working on. And, Larry, I wondered if you could, spend a little bit of time just maybe talking about some of the coordination that we do internally when looking at, some of the different components of the organization that are looking at, assessing our risk and managing it.
Sure, happy to do that. I think at the beginning of the presentation, I indicated that we had some time carved out of our annual plan in order to dedicate some time to this, to be able to demonstrate our activities, and we will be bringing back to the committee the results of that, as we do with all of our activities. We share the results with the committee, and so when we conclude this, and I think it'll probably be at the March meeting of next year, that will bring the results back to the committee. But we've already started doing some things with regards to trying to coordinate our activities across the organization. And so we've initiated some conversations with our enterprise risk management area, compliance, audits, and also what we call our continuous improvement team, where we all have annual plans, if you will, or cyclical type of activities that are performing. One of the things that were mentioned here is kind of trying to coordinate those activities so that we're not impacting the business areas, one right after the other, or even, in fact, stepping on top of each other's toes, perhaps, to get into a business area, and it does take a toll on them. And so we've put this annual calendar of activities together, and then actually reached out and collaborated with the business areas, or coordinated with the business areas, I should say, to make sure that we're performing these activities where we have the least impact. So, for example, we wouldn't go right into the middle of our financial services division when they're in the middle of their year-end audit, right? So we don't want to have competing time there. And so it prepares kind of, you know, an effort for us to coordinate that approach. The another thing that we're doing is trying to prepare for a single risk assessment. And we've initiated meetings. Typically, enterprise risk management will do a risk assessment. Compliance just did a risk assessment. Audits does an annual risk assessment. And they're all at different times of the year, and the business area has to participate in all three of those. And so what we've done is we're working now to coordinate that effort so that we do one single risk assessment instead of three that brings all of the different views together, if you will, so that it has less impact on management. It satisfies the needs of each of those areas, and we're going out one time together rather than performing separate activities. And then we've also initiated what's called assurance mapping. And what that does is it's an activity, if you will, that takes all of our enterprise risks from both strategic as well as what's included in our enterprise risk report that you receive. And then we start looking at the assurance functions within the organization. That includes those three that I mentioned, ERM, compliance, and audits. But there's other assurance functions as well. Our information security office, for example, performs a lot of activities that provide assurance with regards to access to systems and compliance with policy, things like that. The investment office performs a lot of activities with regards to compliance and assurance. And but what we've done is we've tried to look at these different sources of assurances, if you will, that are available to you in the organization, and start mapping of who is providing assurance with regards to the risks that are identified in the organization. And then we'll do some analysis with that to determine whether adequate coverage is being provided with regards to, in the term that we heard today, reassurance for the board, and then if there's any gaps, how can we deploy some resource in order to provide that reassurance going forward, right? And so it's kind of right now we don't know what we don't know, and we just initiated that activity, and so it's something that's real fresh for us, but I think it will allow us, as the standard requires, to demonstrate how that reassurance is being provided throughout the organization. And then we've also began really sharing information with regards to audits with other organizations. And so, in fact, like when we have an exit conference with management, our risk officer is invited to that, our compliance officer is invited to it. And so we have these assurance functions that are participating with management with regards to evaluation of controls and risks within their business areas. And so information is being shared that way as well. And so we have more engagement and involvement. And then also in the last, particularly in the last 2 years, we've worked really closely with the information security officer in order to coordinate audit activity of our information security and cyber, and those reports are shared with the board in closed session. But what that allows us to do is, instead of, say, our ISO independently conducting a penetration test and then audit coming along and conducting a separate penetration test, we coordinate that activity together, and then it allows us to create efficiency and savings. It's again, reduces impact on the organization. So we're able to just do that one time and one and done, and it satisfies both of our needs in order to fulfill what the ISO needs and what we need from an audit perspective. And so we've done that as well. And so we're trying to integrate a lot of these activities together. There's been a lot of benefits that are realized. One is conformance with the standards, of course, from our perspective, but we've become better informed as assurance providers. So risk is more informed and compliance is more informed. And so instead of all of this activity occurring in silos, we're trying to normalize it across the organization so that we all have the same level of understanding. And then, of course, time and effort in conducting the activities and the risk assessments and so on, I think has been created some efficiency as well. And we've gained some efficiencies with regards to information security and cost savings. But there's still opportunities for us to really kind of optimize that coordination. You know, again, I mentioned some other assurance providers that we still need, I think, to bring in and work with, and I think there's opportunities for us to share more there. You know, we can, in more mature organizations that have this, what they call integrated assurance, there's usually a common database where the issues are tracked and all of the assurance providers are aware of what issues are being tracked so that you can look for trends and the need to perhaps revise policy or address certain issues or implement controls. Sometimes there's common or even shared reporting to the board or audit committee, so that we're not reporting the same thing to you from different views, if you will. So you may have noticed in the last closed session with the ISO report that, you know, while the ISO was giving the results of the audit work, that I was there as well. And so to answer any audit questions or bring in, you know, the audit perspective, if you will, with regards to that activity, so that consolidated reporting really helps, and then you're not getting two different reports on the same thing. And then also making sure that, again, through this mapping exercise that we're going to initiate and that we've carved out some time for in the plan, we'll look to see if there's any gaps, and if there is, we'll try to address those. And so I think we've made some progress in this area, but I also believe there's opportunity for us to optimize it a little better and continue to work on that. And again, we'll share the results of it with you kind of at the March meeting when we conclude our plan. If we have an opportunity sooner, we will, but that's what we're kind of planning right now.
I've got a question from
That
Gail.
address every...
I think you covered all. I might have a question, but I'll take Gail.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of the mapping exercise you're going to pursue, will that all be on our board portal? Just in terms of sort of being able to see the progress and having, because I think some of the issues with these assessments is they're always backwards looking, and there's kind of no real-time input to make, if there are midterm corrections, it's hard to make those decisions when you're kind of looking at a backwards assessment. So I don't know if there's some functionality, like Mr. Furston suggested, around using the board portal a little bit more in that regard and making it appropriately real time. So obviously not immediate, but just in an appropriate way.
We'll certainly explore that and report back to you on it. And we haven't really considered that yet, but thank you for the opportunity. We'll look at that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Just a question, Gail. So were you thinking about the process of looking at the mapping and having an opportunity to see its progress before it's formally presented to the board? Is that what you were thinking of? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it may make more sense. All the audit reports I look at, you always kind of look at what's already happened, and then you can correct it at that point, but it's only going forward. So to the extent there's something perhaps that someone else could see or a perspective, in addition to maybe the collaboration that you're talking about where things are peer reviewed, I do wonder if that mapping exercise that you'll be going through, there could be an opportunity for the board to see it too. It's hard because we certainly wouldn't want to interfere with the day-to-day operations. So I don't know if maybe there's an example in another state, but some way of seeing what's happening in a way that, I don't know what the right answer is though.
Okay.